Hello, June. Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation because networks and ecosystems have been such a big part of my own inquiry over the last 10 years. I'd like to start with a question, though, which is, what does the word transformation mean to you?
Well, I've been thinking about that an awful lot in the last couple years. And to me, I guess I would say that transformation is not a goal. It's not a state. It's a process. It's uh, a process of us together, wherever we are located, co-creating a world that's good for all of us. Both
Hmm.
locally, and interacting with others around the globe, and that what transformation creates is going to look really different in every state. But it's that idea of co-creating, which of course is about learning too. Co-creating, learning from what we do and create to continually be making it a better fit for our supporting everyone in our communities. I don't know. Is
Hmm.
that an unusual definition? Is that different?
No, I really appreciate the relational implication there, that it's not necessarily like an independent, isolated event like destination, that it's an
Right. It's not a
ongoing
destination. Yeah.
relational process that occurs between a group of people or a group of nodes inside a system. And I feel that rings very true. It kind of opens up an interesting dimension around what it means to learn in that context and how learning
Right.
uh,
Right.
influences that context. And your background has been in this territory called network weaving, and maybe we can open that up for a moment. Like, what exactly is network weaving?
Well, I mean, I think network weaving again, it's sort of like maybe a state of mind where you are thinking about all your relationships with yourself, with others, with all, and increasingly I'm realizing it's with all the rest of what we call nature, all that part. That network weaving is saying, I'm gonna take responsibility, with others, hopefully, that all these relationships are really healthy and nourishing, caring, supportive, peer-like. And so network weavers go around paying attention to things that we often are neglected, which, who's connected to whom, who's left out, who's being left out, who's marginalized and not really hearing about what's going on, and then really reaching out to make connections, and not just with themselves, but always thinking, oh, who could I connect this person to that would support them, or that they could help, or maybe that they could move to action together and co-create something together.
Hmm.
So,
I'm
and
curious.
network weavers are always thinking about learning too. They're always creating space for people to reflect, stop, and reflect on what they've been doing, and uh, how it's been working, and uh, perhaps changing, adapting, getting insights, making breakthroughs.
Hmm. I'd love to start with, so there's a couple of directions we could go here around what exactly it means to learn in a network. But before we go there, I'd love to really inquire into the more personal dimension of that, because you mentioned looking for, who's not included, what's missing. And I would imagine that part of that is a learned process that, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's missing. And
Yeah.
and there's some sort of process there of discovery for yourself around what it actually should be included here. And I'm wondering how, like, how you think about that, and maybe how that's evolved for you
Mhm.
in terms of your personal understanding of being able to look at a situation and know what you do or don't know.
I mean, I think one of the intriguing things about, because it's so important. There's this big shift to being more relational, seeing that rather than goal oriented, being relational and seeing those flows. And I think that's one of the things I love about network maps. And for many years, I help people create maps of their networks, not and using the word network not as meaning any kind of formal network, but networks are just really all the relationships around you and the patterns they create, and being able to see the patterns in relationships. And some patterns like hub and spoke. It's one person in the middle or a group, and everybody getting broadcasted information. That's not a particularly healthy form of relationship and network. And so, network maps really help you see what's missing. That's what's so important for them, to me, is that they really helped you see the very questions that I was asking about marginalization and who's left out. And I think those are really important. So that's been really one important, way that I've learned about what's missing. I think the other thing is really dairy. And one thing that I love about networks is that they allow a lot more diversity. You're not going to be married to all the people that you're in a network with or connected to. And so that allows you to be braver and to reach out to people who are different, organizations, communities who are very different from you. And we really need that, because like you said, it's like we're like a fish in the water of our own culture, and we can't really, you say water, what's water? Well, it's everything that surrounds you. And so you really have to run into people who have a very different cultures and ways of being for you to even see your own culture and not be imprisoned by it. I mean, right now, so many of us who've been raised in the West are really imprisoned by this dominance culture that's all about separation and hierarchy and criticism and conflict and war. And, I think we can't see all the tiny ways that impacts us without having that experience of realizing there are other cultures that are really different.
Mm.
And many of them, may have qualities that are much healthier
Mm.
than ours.
What are the what's the distinction for you between a community, a network, and an ecosystem? Do you see those as separate kinds of things?
Well, I don't see anything as separate these days, but they're wonderfully, they help you look a different way at
Mm.
something. So for me, a network is just about relationships, and it may be somewhat formalized, especially if you want to, it really helps you focus on something. So, a formal network might focus on climate change or education or whatever. And so it gives you some ability to focus your energies. Whereas a community, to me, when I hear that word, I think more about belongingness and a sense of, that these are my people that I'm going to have some level of safety with, or I'm going to have those kinds of really important connections and feeling, and where I can take risks and being deeper. Now, networks can build community.
Mm.
So, I think that, and every community is also can be seen through the glasses of a network, and where you could look at the community and see the relationships, in it. And then, the term ecosystem, which I truly love, is really about how everything relates in a sort of a resource way with everything else. So an ecosystem is like all about um, a landscape where you can see all the beneficial relationships between what entities or whatever. And so I use the term that networks need what I call a support ecosystem. So that's kind of like the ground from which um, action, collaborative action can happen. And so I'm really interested in, how resources flow. How does money flow in a network or community? It's really important that we change some of the ways that money
Mm.
flows, for example, or how do we organize ourselves? Like I think one of the most important things we need is our pools of facilitators or network weavers that groups of people can draw on when they need some expert, somebody to help them meet together and learn how to collaborate. We're not, I mean, we grew up in a world where in school collaboration was called cheating. And so
Right.
we have to look, there's a lot, and where we're judged on our individual efforts. And so being able to collaborate, which is so important if we're going to co-create the world that's good for all of us. An ecosystem really needs people, resources of people who can help us learn how to collaborate in really fun and engaging and embodied ways.
Mm, mm.
Oh, I
That's
love
a
the ecosystem. Yeah.
that's a really interesting dimension there, though, around learning how to collaborate, because there's the learning whatever learning might be occurring across the network or an ecosystem, and then there's the more kind of way of being aspect of learning how to collaborate. And this was something I began to observe about 10 years ago when I just began to notice that one of the primary dimensions was what's the quality of listening, what's the quality of receptivity, what's the capacity to really be together, and then if that isn't there, everything else is kind of a symptom of that. So I wonder what you've observed around that dimension of.
So this is like a really big kind of breakthrough that I've been making about learning
Mm,
communities is that, I mean, transformation takes place on so many different sort of levels. And the one that's beginning to get a lot of notice, people call mindset. I prefer the word worldview. Like,
mm,
how do we see and make sense of the world? And so we're shifting from the old worldview that I described of dominance in a hierarchy to one that is more collaborative and caring and innovative. And I think that learning communities are the place where this can happen. So, besides learning whatever it is you're learning, I think that needs to be, that's a great place where we can learn what I'm calling micro processes. So, little actions or practices like listening activities, for example, or go rounds where everybody
mm,
takes a turn, that just by practicing them, we're moving into a new worldview. So in a go round, everybody is taking a turn and hopefully of about equal time. And so you don't have the dominance of a few yakety yaks, taking up all the space. Everybody's taking a turn. You're learning to interact as peers. And so, I think that it's really important that we kind of seed our learning communities with many of these micro processes that,
mhm,
like a peer assist, where somebody comes with a challenge they're facing and the whole group listens, asks really good questions, and then they give advice. So like my experience, I tried this, and then the person synthesizes and says what they're going to do, and then everybody says, what did I learn from this peer assist? So
mm,
everybody realizes that they're not just helping somebody else, they're helping themselves as well. So that's a micro process that you can interject into any learning space that helps people interact in like a caring, supportive, and listening way.
mm,
So I'm seeing that this is like a missing, like to me, a lot of transformation is about, there's just these small missing pieces that if we can include them in what we're doing now, they don't take more work. They're usually lots of fun. And
mhm,
that's what transformation can be, finding those small missing pieces and really, filling them with some of these new practices. And so that's I think really like another piece is the whole learning piece. Like we need to learn how to learn. I look
Mm.
at the stuff out there about learning and I go, wow, I think there's more to it than that. But, we need to get together and figure what are the micro processes of learning. So it's very fractal. It's like every few minutes, people are stopping to reflect and think about what they're learning. Every at
Mm.
the end of meetings, they're learning. And then they have sessions that are just about reflecting and learning and harvesting that learning. So, I think there's a lot of micro processes around learning to learn
Mm. Mm.
that that that
I,
that are yet to be discovered.
I'd love to open that territory up a little bit as far as what you've observed about, I want to use the term high functioning learning communities. If you've
Uh-huh,
witnessed this
uh-huh.
in practice where you have an example of a community that is really learning together or learning how to learn in a notable or powerful way.
Well, the one piece I see most missing is I think every learning community needs to be really connected to practice. So, we need to really move from the old training model where you went somewhere for 3 days and just learn, 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 learn. And then you come back, you're overwhelmed. You come back to your community. You were the only person from your community who went. And so you're just like overwhelmed. And very little of that learning translates into your practice in your community. And so, I see learning communities as taking place over time where one, I really like learning communities. I know there's kind that are just about learning, but to me, it's like I've been thinking about this thing called, I call it connected experiments. So the basis of a learning community being sets of maybe there's 25 or 50 different collaboratives from local communities, maybe all over the world, who come together to learn about what they're doing. And so all of them are focused on somewhat the same area, but they're each, of course, taking a different approach and they all have their own contexts, but they come together and the first thing they do is they start stealing ideas from each other. I've just seen this over and over, and they hear about what one of the other groups are saying. Oh, wow. Well, we could do it that way. That would really help us do what we're doing. Of course, we want to tweak it and change it.
Mm.
So they steal ideas from each other, but they learn how to see patterns of success or even patterns of failure. That's really important too. But they hear about each other, what each other's doing, and they say, oh, did you notice that when all of those of us that are really have a strong participative element where we're really engaging the community, those seem to be blossoming really faster than those that are kind of have a more top-down approach. And so everybody's seeing these patterns of success that they wouldn't like lots of times in the oldies. I would hear about these groups and they came up with this brilliant idea, but they didn't realize it was a brilliant idea because they invented it just as a way to get things done. And it's only when they share it with others and other people say, oh my gosh, what a great idea,
Mm.
that they realize that here is something that's really worthy of passing on to others that could really help them out. And so, I've seen learning communities as a place where, you try something, you come and you share it, you get, and then you can juxtapose it against other projects and begin to notice these patterns. You can also get a chance to learn new practices, uh, things like a peer assist. The part that's often missing is really helping people take the time during their learning session to talk about how they're going to take it back to their community.
Mm. Mm.
What are they going to do? How are they going to do it? What might be the barriers and challenges? Who are they going to need to work with to make this happen? And then they try something out, they come back, and that's where that peer assist, because oftentimes when you try something new, it doesn't work quite perfectly. And so you come back and then you get help and figuring out how to make it better, and you go back again. And so it's that taking things back to your community. That's where that transformation really starts happening, because then it actually starts making a difference in your community. What do you think of
Mm. Yeah, and I'm curious, like, because you mentioned this example of 20 collaboratives coming together. So can you give me a specific example of what kind of community would have like 20 nodes that come together to then share resources or
Oh,
have
no, no,
conversations?
I'm talking about 20 different communities.
20 different. So, but what would be the context for that?
Okay,
Like a
so for example, once years ago, there were, and I think it was only 6 groups, but around the country in the U.S. who were working on a local, something that we called regional flavor, which was where they were trying to get a local food, um, businesses and operations connected to tourism, connected to the arts,
Mm,
music, whatever, and get all of those folks in very specific local communities that did have a lot of flavor, everything from a White Earth reservation in Minnesota to a group around Memphis, and all that wonderful history and culture there. So all these groups would, in those days, we actually went and visited each other. Each of the communities visited another community, and again, that's where I saw the stealing of ideas that
mm,
was
mm,
just phenomenal. Like somebody had a really good way of publicizing what they were doing, and other groups went, "Oh yeah, we could do that," and or they had art walks or similar kinds of things where you went to restaurants and then you went to art galleries and things like that. So um, they were really doing that kind of everybody notching everybody else's strategies, up a bit, because each group had invented some things that the other groups hadn't
mm,
really thought about. But they did have a focus. I think it's really important to have a focal area that's not too broad. And this combining, tourism with local food and the arts. That was a really nice focal area, that so everybody had a lot in common. It wasn't just a random group, oh, we're going to learn.
mm,
It was like, we're going to learn about developing this new kind of, um, this new kind of synthesis in our communities. But there could be many, many different focal areas. But one thing I think is kind of missing is that and this is why networks of networks are so important, is that we need to get all the networks of people that are working on, let's say, climate change or on food systems or immigration, and get them to start convening and raising money to fund these connected experiments, these learning
mm,
communities that really are focused on making change in a particular area, but they're also learning how to be different kinds of people and interact differently. They're learning, they're seeing patterns of success, and they're also harvesting, capturing the knowledge that they're and learning that they're gaining to share out with the wider world.
mm, mm.
So this is
I
the model I've been working on. There's tons and tons of these different kinds of learning communities, and I would love to get them all together, because
mm,
each one is just like these groups I talked about in the food thing. Each different approach, learning labs, transformation labs, all these kinds of innovative, connected experiments that and some of them aren't learning together, and they really need to be, but they need to be learning together. And I just think that this kind of model would, right now, I feel like we're also overwhelmed by,
mm,
just like, we're starting to think in systems and realize there's these massive systems out there like food system, but they're so complex that we get overwhelmed. But I think having a identifying opportunity spaces. Some people call them leverage points, but I like opportunity spaces where if a whole bunch of us got together and really tried stuff out and learned from it and shared that, I think transformation would start moving at a much
Hmm.
better pace.
There are so many dimensions to what you're saying. One is just what does it mean to learn from something in the sense of, I also observe there's just in the space of transformation, there's tons of different organizations, initiatives, labs that are doing their own thing. And, we're, of course, at Sutra, we're doing our own thing. And a lot of the learning, some of it is explicit, it's tangible, it's kind of easy to identify, and then some of it is a lot more subtle, somehow tacit or experiential, and it's harder to be like, this is what you can learn. And so that's one dimension, just being able to somehow make tangible what exactly the learning that could be shared is. But then the second dimension is actually the flow of information. Like even if there is information between like
Yeah.
between nodes in kind of aligned interests or something. And so I wonder like how you've seen that work in practice. Is that like a person like yourself who then convenes different conversational spaces, or what? Because it's like it's one thing to talk about it in theory, and in theory it's like it sounds so cool, but in what does it look like in practice?
Well, so one of the things I've been thinking about that could really make a difference, first of all, identifying this role. Now, just like a network weaver, everybody's a network weaver, but you can be really, really skilled and have that be your life's work, or you can just be a network weaver because as you're being part of a, local project. I think we need this role called knowledge weaver, or learning weaver. I don't know what, something like that. That's a set of people around the globe that say, I am going to learn everything I can with these other folks about how do we harvest knowledge and share it with others, and what do the processes look like. So just think if we could get a group of us together that were really, really interested, like, in how is it that we, like, so there's a great meeting, like I often say, oh, that person said something so well at time stamp 31 minutes into that session. And then, but how often have I gone back in and captured that little video snippet and shared it out? But
Hmm.
that's something that if we were supported as knowledge harvesters or knowledge weavers, we could actually, try and say, oh, okay, is it a best way to capture is through a little video snippets? Can we write up how can we learn to use AI and transcripts to really help us more quickly and easily capture learning from sessions? Where are venues and funders? Oh, just need to hear this so much that we need to invest in this learning piece. There is so much that is energy that's wasted because it's not, captured, harvested, and
Hmm.
shared out. And that that investing in just helping us ramp up our understanding of learning and then how it can be shared, how it can be actually taken. What is it that can be shared? We don't need more recipes that are slavishly followed. And so, in as many people when they hate that word scaling because they feel like it's going to be that recipes are going to be imposed. And we all need to become those cooks where, oh yeah, like I love to cook. But when I do, I read like 10 different recipes on the internet, and then I say, I think I'm
Then you
gonna
make your
do
own.
this, that, and no, people in my family don't really like X, so I'm gonna leave that out. But oh, there's a great idea here. So I think we need to hone that same kind of skill at what is it about this recipe that is so basic that no matter what variant I'm going to do, and that's what I'm going to share out. And so I think those are kinds of things that we're just starting.
Mm,
I'd love to get people together that were interested in talking about, the the art and science of learning, and dig in a lot deeper
mm. In your
than
experience, is this usually a conversational process, like in a community? Like how, when you think of facilitating some sort of learning process across a community or a network, what, like, given the way you might approach that today, what does that actually look like?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. So conversational. A lot of people are really good at that. I think there are facilities out there fabulous at getting conversations. I've been really intrigued lately, and have been working with a woman, Aries Sahagan in Mexico City, on how can we begin to collect data that is owned by and for networks, not, something that's imposed as, as a funder imposes, oh, you got to tell us how many of this you did and that you did. But data that is really helps us learn more. So, for example, like network maps are a kind of data that could be collected in real time. We've been working on a way that you can collect data in real time on shifting relationships. And so, at least network weavers in a network could look and say, look at, we are the core of our network is all white Western folks. We want to be, global South led, and they can actually use that data over time, looking at the network and shift that and see if they are succeeding by successive maps that happen. So there's a lot of data. Like, for example, this thing we were talking about worldview or mindset shift. We have surveys that, so a group, I have these lists that we're getting together of maybe 50 or 75 values that lots of people interested in new ways of being, use this language. So a network could, or a collaboration could, select 10 that they really wanted to help shift in their network. So you create a simple survey. People take at the beginning, they say, oh, we're really good at being open to new ideas, but letting go of control, oh, being comfortable with uncertainty. No, we're not too good at that. Let's talk about what strategies we can try to shift our behavior, or what processes we can try to shift our behavior. And so a month or two later, they take the survey again. Have things shifted? So
Mm,
that kind of learning is just something I haven't seen too much of. And I'm really intrigued with how, we could easily get that kind of data, that then in networks, groups of people could use that data to help make the networks healthier, make those shifts take place that, we all really want to see. So
and
what do you think? Is anybody else doing that?
I've definitely seen versions of that, and I think that's such a powerful way to also have it come from the group. Like, here are the things we want to shift. How do we want to do this? Doing it or trying whatever we came up with, and then actually observing the result, not necessarily from this frame of what do we do right or what do we do wrong, but what are we learning? And I just feel like that kind of like feedback informed process where you're actually learning from it is super powerful. I mean, we do a version of that in our program where we invite people to. We run this thing called Transformational Experience Design, where we basically coach people on how to create online spaces that invite deep connection. But everybody has an opportunity to facilitate a session, and so we call them before and after action reviews. And so before they do it, we invite them to reflect on, what do you want to learn? What do you think will happen? What are you going to be paying attention to? And then after, what did you learn? What happened? What are you going to do differently next time? And I feel like that kind of learning, whether it's individual or in the context of a community or a group, like, that's the most powerful stuff. It's like, what do we want to happen? What are our ideas about how it might happen? Let's try it, but not like then have this whole thing of like, oh, we failed, it didn't work out, because inevitably it's not going to go the way you think it might have. maybe it will, who knows? And but then really taking that process to that time to learn from that, to digest, and then lean into the next version. I feel like it does require some discipline. It does require like some sort of like commitment to that process though. Like have you seen groups that have successfully worked with a process like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. You're right. It's not even just discipline, but it's part of that whole worldview thing. We have to shift out of this get so much done, goal orientation, planning orientation, to-do list orientation, and shift into the most important thing we're doing is learning, and that we really need to, not commit to it, make it a priority. We have to learn what are those good questions, and then what do we do with the answers to those questions? And so, there's a lot there. I mean, I have seen more and more groups moving this way, but I think not many people realize you have to work on that worldview that's keeping you from prioritizing learning, as well as on the how do we learn well together.
Mm. What's your observation of the leadership, the relationship between some kind of leadership role, like an individual who might be driving a process, or the capacity for a network to truly self-organize or a community to truly self-organize? Like, have you actually seen examples where it
Yeah, it's a
isn't?
process though. It's a process. Like,
Mm,
so, you have to, I mean, so, you do, I mean, to me, everybody's a leader, but it's just a different kind. And part of any leader's number one thing is to help others become leaders. Get out of that. See, we've been raised to be so passive. How can you get more people to initiate and to feel confident? Well, that's where coaching comes in. And I think that that's a huge part of what needs to happen in learning communities, that you're not doing for people, you're not leading them in the traditional way where you're doing everything or telling them what to do, but you're showing them how to do it. So you're going to build an agenda, you work with a couple people in your collaborative and who are interested in learning, and you say, okay, here's a sample agenda. Now you notice it has this and this, there's a relationship building time, da da da. Now let's work on this agenda together so that you can help facilitate this next meeting. And then you have them facilitate, and
mm,
they're creating the agenda, sending it out for feedback from others, and they're gradually building that confidence and the skills with the idea. See, you put that expectation. You can lead this group. You can coordinate. I
mm,
think you can coordinate this group, but your role as a coordinator also needs to make sure that other people are building their skills. So every meeting, you want a different person taking note taking, so they learn that skill, or you want to co-facilitate with somebody else so others are learning those skills. So it's like, not leadership is about this wonderful moving from a stream to a river to the ocean, where more and more people are building these skills and capacities, so more is going to happen. I mean, how
mm,
do we think that with just a handful of these special leaders we're going to transform the world? No, it's about everybody shifting and moving and building their skills and
mm.
being able to initiate and co-create with others.
I love the subtle coaching dimension you're pointing to as well. It's, in the sense of like, here's an agenda I put together, but here's why I put together this way. Here's how the flow builds a relationship and is designed to somehow open up the conversational space. I feel like those are really subtle cues that can be offered to people that are supporting you to then prepare them to be stewards of the community, which in my experience has really been one of the most challenging things, at least for us, in terms of any community effort we've ever been involved in, which is the transition from us as being the primary kind of source of like momentum in the community to somehow more people taking on roles of responsibility and taking charge of different elements of the community's operation.
And it won't happen unless you're explicit. You have it in your head from the beginning. My main role is helping others build
Mm,
their skill, the skills that I have. And you only have to be a half a step ahead, but
mm.
but it's this new role of saying, from the beginning, I'm going to make sure that I am working with people so that they are taking that they are taking over, some or all of my role, and
Mm.
coaching them in that, showing them there's a lot to learn, and then helping them share that with others. So then you get that nice cascading, I call it rippling. That's what transformation, that's cascading,
Mm.
rippling process where more and more people, build those skills, the capacities, the desire, the initiative to really, make change happen.
Is there anything else you think about in the context of helping a community become more self-organized? How like somehow encouraging more people in a community to take responsibility for the community's function?
Yeah, well, one thing that I would love to see is more stories, more narratives about groups that have done it, because certainly happening all over. People don't even know to call it self-organizing. So
Mm.
we got some work to do there. Yeah, but
What
yeah.
does that mean to you, self-organizing? I'm curious because people use this word all the time.
Well, there's the way, my background, I came from learning about complexity back in 1980 before it was called that. But and so there's the whole way complexity science describes it. But I think that where we're deficient in is this idea that anybody can see something that needs to happen, or they want to make happen. They can find others who are interested in the same thing. They can make something, they can experiment, they
Mm.
can learn from it, and
Hmm.
and adapt, and they can share what they're doing with whether it failed or not. It's equally, valuable in terms of learning. And so, that whole process, it's so we're more aware. It's like we're like termites. Termites, there's no boss, and they build these fabulous castles. Everyone is different in every continent, and yet they're just paying attention. They're giving out lots of information, and sharing lots of, oh yeah, I did this at work, come help me. They're doing all that kind of communicating, and then they're noticing if what they did
Mm.
worked. If it doesn't, they stop doing it and they do try something else. And we'd be wise to be like,
Mm.
like termites. I really believe.
So I kind of interrupted what you were saying initially, which was just around like how can like what other elements might you consider in supporting a community to become more like that and supporting more people to feel a sense of agency or initiative, this thing we're calling self-organizing.
Well, it starts with the network weavers, people who are willing to, they're crazy to learn more about this stuff. They want to learn together. And so, I mean,
Mm.
I think it's always good, just reach out, finding those people who want to learn about this new kind of leadership that is all these things I've been talking about, and start getting them together to actually experiment and, try things out. I'm getting together. I'm trying to get, since I wrote the Network Weaver Handbook, which is still, pretty good, but it's been 12 years. And I'm working on, so I have a 10 module, like just slide decks, on everything that I've learned about, self-organizing networks, um, in the last decade. And I'm trying to, get that. I'll talk to you some more about this, but trying to get this out to people, so that these network weavers who want to, take the next step, have some idea about, how to get started on. Not that I have answers. I mean, I see these ideas as just inspirations for people to riff off of, or add to, or do something different, or fill in all the gaps. But I think we have to, all of us, not just me, but all of us need to. There's so much we've learned that has not ever been put in a way that can be shared with others. And I realized, oh boy, I've been really at fault here not getting this stuff out. in the way that could be useful to get others inspired or starting to. I mean, because I am an old lady and I've had a lot of experience I'd love to share. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to figure out exactly how to do that. And I
What does
think we
that
all need to
what does
try.
that look like? Convening conversation groups, blogging
Yeah,
more? I
yeah.
mean,
Well,
like,
yeah, I think first of all, working with Phyto Network, and if you don't know about Phyto
mm,
Network, it's the most exciting place I think on the planet right now. And I think that with Phyto, we're going to try to get some groups of both practitioners, especially Global South, and expert people who been thinking about networks for a long time, and start having uh, some groups where we, yeah, get together and people say, I don't understand this at all. Or, oh, this is exciting. I want to hear more about it. And so that we can have a living deck. I'd love
mm,
to see, and have versions. I'd love to see versions of, decks on self-organizing, for example. So but yeah, it's going to be conversation because I'm sure, you know, I found that nothing is, the solitary thinker is pretty soon going to be like the dinosaurs. And what we need now is how we can get this collaborative intelligence. One person may start and put a scaffolding out there, but it's a scaffolding for others to participate in and help co-design.
Have you seen, so is this almost always like over a Zoom call or something, or have you seen versions of this in a purely software based kind of thing that work really well?
In a software-based kind of thing. Oh, you mean like your platform?
Well, I'm just curious if you've seen implementations of this kind of learning or exchange, like
Yeah,
in a
that's what I
software
need.
versus.
And I want to talk with you more because I do
Mm,
think that, this platforms thing is a huge, huge issue. At platforms that are not things and places, but again, are processes. So, how do you bring in ideas? How do you let them be riffed on and co-designed from? And then how do people access them? What are the different ways, like individual learning, group learning, discuss, where's the discussion? Where's the how's the application work? How do we know what happened with an application? How do we support people, as they learn? I mean, I don't think the ecosystems to support all the stuff we've been talking about, Lorenz, is all there yet. And
mm, mm,
I think we need to, again, we need the funding that can help us really get our platforms need to be as complex as the problems we're trying to solve.
mm.
Not yet,
Mm-mm. I think what you're saying though is a really important thing to be explicit about, because I know early on when I first started on this work, I kind of felt that there was someone out there who had figured it all out and I just hadn't found them yet. And I think the reality is that we're all figuring it out as we go. We're all sensing into a new way of operating as a global system. And there's something about that, really recognizing it, that there isn't a solution out there that you just haven't quite found yet, that you're actually at the birth stage, that this nascent stage of creating that system, if you're called to do so.
and I'm glad you're called to do so. But yeah, we
Um,
have to muck around a bit. We do have to muck around and, so that we can really figure out, all these different aspects of what a learning platform could look like to really, really support massive, massive learning and sharing around the globe.
mm, mm. June, thank you so much for your time together today and just sharing your literally your lifetime of of practice and experience in this territory. I really appreciate having an opportunity to
Oh,
connect
it's
again.
been so fun for me because I don't often have the chance to go on and on for an hour like this. Thank you so much, Lorenz. It's really been a joy, and I hope people are inspired by this. And feel free to contact me if you and I mean that you, Lorenz, and others, if you want to continue this discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, June.